Jumbo and Habari, everyone. I want to welcome you back to Kwanzaa, a modern celebration for 2024. This is night 3. We are celebrating Ujima, and I have a very, very special friend with me this evening to celebrate how we are going to work collectively. So please join me in welcoming Representative-elect to the 33rd District of the North Carolina House, former school board member for Wake County Schools, and a member of the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I have with me Monika Johnston-Hostler. Please welcome her, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to see you. Habari Gani. The word is Ujima. I'm so glad that you carved out just a few minutes to spend with us and celebrate Kwanzaa.
It is my pleasure.
So have you celebrated Kwanzaa before? Is this something that is a regular occurrence for you, or is this something new?
So I would probably say irregular since my daughter graduated from high school. I actually started celebrating Kwanzaa with my in-laws, and so and then one of my great aunts brought me my own candles, and so I celebrated it so my daughter would understand it. But she's home for Christmas, but our Christmas have become very different once she's gotten older. So I would say in the last 3 to 5 years it's become irregular, but it was very important to me to give her the practice and principles while she was younger.
I love the concept of making sure that our children get the sense of it. That's something important to me. My little, she knows that mommy live streams Kwanzaa every year. And so she has to have her own episode. So after all the lights and everything are shut down, like I have to go to another part of the house. And like right now we're over there in the corner with the Barbie house. And like, I think the Barbies are having Kwanzaa and stuff along with us. And she wants to participate and she wants to, do all the things. And that to me is landing in such a happy place. I'm so glad that like she sees it and she appreciates it. And
Absolutely. And it's given our girls, especially our Black girls, a sense of who they are, which is I think what Kwanzaa does for me is reminds me of the collectivism, which is interesting. This is our night. And I think that's important because we often assimilate into individualism, which is not who we are, I believe, to the core of our DNA. That's not who we are. So Kwanzaa brings me back at the end of a year, but it actually propels me to the beginning of a new year, steeped in who I am and what I believe.
That is so powerful. I love that you are using it both at the end and at the beginning, because it does go from the day after Christmas. A lot of people really think of Christmas as like, and now we're done. You go from the day after Christmas and you don't just go to New Year's Eve, you go all the way to New Year's Day.
That's right.
So that is very strategic on the part of the founder, Dr. Karenga. And I am grateful that, we have this 7 days to actually sit still and formulate and think about these things. So you mentioned the principle and the collectivism behind it. So let's talk a little bit about the actual definition. Mm-hmm. So tonight, the definition and the principle is to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. This tends to be one of the big ones. Yes. So talk to me a little bit, and we can break it in pieces, but let's talk about this principle and the definition and how that lands.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting. I have a colleague of mine who works in the same field I do in violence against women. And she started an organization, and the name of it is Ujima. And it is ending violence in the African American community. And she has a national organization. She works all over the country doing this work. So I say that to say that I always tell people that my work in the anti-violence against women and children field is indeed my ministry. I believe it is at the core of who I am, because I believe that when people are safe, we have the ability to thrive, and it allows us to have access to the things that we deserve. And so violence in our homes, individually against us, or in our community is our brothers and sisters' problems. So interestingly enough, even in a more secular way, I describe my work using the definition of Ujima, because I do believe that the problems of my neighbors and my brothers and sisters are my problems, and that the only way to actually change them is to collectively solve them. So the work that I do, my organization has the word coalition in the name of it, because I don't believe that we can do any of that work without being in community or in coalition or collective.
That's so correct. And I think it also lends itself to why you felt led to run for office. Listen, because as someone who is married to an elected official, Corey was on last night for night two. It's no joke. It is no joke. There's a lot that comes along with that. You are called to a higher purpose, and a higher standard is applied to everything. And so to do this work, what did it mean for you? How were you led into public service in that way?
That's a great question. So, and I'm very transparent about this. So I introduced my daughter, very similar to introducing her to Kwanzaa, introduced her to so many iconic Black people, especially Black women. That's been important to me since she was little. So in 2009, 10, 11, and 12, actually, Wake County Public Schools was going through quite a moment. We were on national news, and I was complaining about it. As you know, I'm married to a Wake County Public School teacher who's been teaching 20 plus years, not just in this district, but prior to us moving here. And so I was complaining about the schools. We had a daughter entering public schools at that time. And so a running joke for my family is when my daughter says, "Mommy, I have a question," that means it's something she's heard us talk about and she's been pondering it. And I want you to know she still does that at 19. After she's pondered what she heard, she inquires more. And so we were on our way to daycare and she said, "Mommy, you said that you believe that Rosa Parks is someone that you model your life after." And she was like, "And that means you say you can't be a complainer. You have to be a part of the solution." And she was like, "You keep complaining every day about schools." And I've been asked to run for school board and I'd said no multiple times. I didn't think elected office was my role. I thought advocating on behalf of our community to elected
They are different.
officials was my
They are
job.
different.
And so I literally ran because I'd been asked multiple times and I felt like my daughter, being the example that I decided to set for her, I believe she called me into action, and I took her up on the call. And to your point, I did not think about that my entire family is a part of that process and we all are called to a higher space. And honestly, our community has expectations and accountability, and we have the responsibility to meet those needs. So it is definitely, I always said I was not called into the ministry to be a preacher. I think elected officials are very similar in that the expectations of our community are high, and it is my responsibility to be accountable to them.
Absolutely. And I have to say that you have held the line, my sister. You show up in ways that are so beautiful and um, so authentic. And I'm grateful for that. Because again, my daughter is now looking at Auntie Monika
Right.
and at so many other Black women elected officials that we've had the pleasure of running into as we go to these events and that kind of thing. So thank you for stepping up, for hearing the call, and for actually following through with it, because your service in the school board certainly has led Wake County into a better position, and so much so that we are excited to send you to the North Carolina House.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't also say that acknowledging that you are the wife of an elected official and you are present and show up and hold that role as well. And so thank you for the work that you do. And so does little Carly. She came to a school event with Corey and I totally was playing the role of auntie, probably too bad I was giving her ice cream. Uh, But to your point, I do believe that we are a community in that way as well as elected officials, as brothers and sisters in this work. And we would be remiss if we didn't also acknowledge that you're an educator. And so it is important to me that educators also see me as a partner on the school board and has seen me in that way. And no doubt about it, going to the legislature, and we all now share the same community and district for the first time, Corey and I. And so I'm excited about a different level of relationship that we will have, because you
Yeah.
do have Carly in school. You're an educator. He is a municipal elected official, and all of those will be important pieces and feedback that I'll want as a member of the House.
And I'm so glad that you touched on that, the way that communities shift and change and who you are called to partner with. The moms, we went to the Christmas program at school. Mommy was so proud. And Carly was up there, and she was in the kindergarten, first grade a cappella choir, and they did their thing. They did their thing. And the PTA moms made an appeal, and I was like, it's time. I have been called. I have
That's right.
I was
PTA was my first education role.
that happen, you know? And it kind of like it was a moment of realization for me that okay, here we are. It's you. It's you. It's now
It's
your
your
responsibility to like be at the bake sale, and I saw the moms, and they had the hot cocoa station set up and the Christmas cookies out, and they were welcoming, and you know, just thinking about what that means and how things are shifting and changing for me, as now a parent in Wake County schools. I've been employed with Wake County schools for quite some time, but now that I have my own little baby in those school buildings, I'm seeing things differently. And one thing that I will say is, you know, when the teacher asks for snacks,
Yep.
it's snack time. We're going to roll through BJ's or Costco or Sam's. It's snack time. The teacher said when she needs pencils, which, you know, she's in a really great school and they have tons of resources in that building. So the needs haven't been much, but when I do see them, I feel spurred to jump in there and fly into action.
And practice the principle we're talking about today, right? Like because you have the ability to do that for Carly, then that is showing up for all of those littles in her building who don't have parents who can show up. So that is, I mean, again, I feel called to say that is putting this principle into action in her school.
And it's necessary, you know,
That's right.
and beyond her school, she's also taking Taekwondo. I'm so
Oh,
proud. We have entered the space. I thought for sure that Dance Mom would come next, but we're happy. We're very, very pleased. And that has been a community there. She's met some other kids her same age, but then also there are some teenagers there who are really just spectacular kids. They're wonderful young people. And, you know, they have the responsibility of working with the little kids. And so Corey and I have the responsibility of working with the teenagers and helping them. And
right.
it just is such an ecosystem
That's
that occurs. So tell me a little bit about, I know I'm talking to a dance mom. Tell me a little bit about how that experience has called on your sense of Ujima.
Oh, I love that. So it's so funny. So Gabby, she started dancing at 2, and she loved it. And like you know for yourself, as someone who's a performer, we knew when she was little this was her calling. But as parents, we require her to try all the things. And the thing that she was really good at actually was karate. So we had a whole community there. And to your point, even though she stopped at about 9 in karate, I love that her dojo master still followed her. So I say that to say that there's something about community that once you create it and invest in it, especially with the practices that we believe that once you're our brother and our sister, you're our community. And so we saw that. And even when he sees us now, he's like, how's Pop Tart doing? That's what he called her. Uh, and granted, she's 19. But as a dance mom, oh my goodness, that's a whole world that I knew nothing of because I wasn't a dancer. It wasn't a community that I understood. But we are still friends with those moms. She
Mm-hmm.
actually yesterday, speaking of kind of how you take care of people, her dance studio created big sisters and little sisters, or actually brothers because they have boys too. And so she has a little sister, and she and her 2 friends from dance who are her age, this is their second year in college. And since they became their little sisters in high school, Yesterday, they took them to buy a Christmas gift and they went ice skating and they had hot cocoa. And she's kept that up with that family, both the daughter, and their daughter's also an only child. We're friends with the family. And so, to your point, we have a community that are her peers, right? Like the kids that are her age, the families, they have been invested in my political career. They have provided resources and a shoulder and an ear to listen to. It's a very diverse community. Speaking of, one of her really closest friends is Jewish. So Christmas this year was the first day of Hanukkah as well. So
Mhm.
it has also expanded not just the people in our circle, but it's expanded our knowledge, our understanding of community, how diverse our communities are. But it's been interesting because you also know, like family, there isn't always joy. There's
Yeah.
also struggles and challenges, and some of those differences are unique. No surprise, I'm an elected official, but even before that, I'm very outspoken about my beliefs about the community. The dance community definitely requires resources. And so for a very long time, she was the only Black girl.
Yeah.
And that was important for me to let people know that do you see that she's the only Black girl and we're the only Black parents, and what that means for resources. And so, to your point, one of the things that Bobby and I explained to Gabby is your job to be supportive of little girls who are coming up behind you, who look like you, who them and their families, which we do help them navigate this system. But more importantly, how do you make your gift accessible to others? And right? So getting her to understand, whether it's at church or in community, that she give back to those beautiful, amazing, talented kids who don't have the access and resource to being a part of a dance community like we were. Again, it is a family, girl. There are some days that we're like, yes, we love each other. And there are other days like, yeah, we're real different. We're not the same. But because our kids were together often, it is like a family. And so my relationships are still stable and standing with those families. And so are hers, especially with the kids that are her age, but more importantly, to her little sister, or as she calls her little.
I love that. And I think it's an important point that you make, that your brothers and sisters may not see that they have a problem.
That's right.
And sometimes it is incumbent upon us to advocate and say, okay, I think you have a blind spot here.
That's right.
Can we talk about X, Y, or Z? Or I don't think that you're seeing what I'm experiencing in the same way that I am. And I think there are some polite and appropriate ways to do
Mhm.
that. And then there are some times where you have to like settle in and dig your heels and say,
But
okay,
Diggy Mills in. I mean, and I will say, I think it might have been Gabby's ninth grade year. Her studio actually, um, in my opinion, really came to a place where the studio owner said, Monika, can you help me start a 501c3? I want to give back. Because we have all of these amazing dancers who've been on So You Think You Can Dance.
yeah,
They are famous. They've been on tour with Taylor Swift. And we brought them to the studio and allowed any student in Wake County Public Schools free access to take classes, to learn from those. And the beauty is, a couple of our schools, Gabby's middle school, her former middle school, and another high school in our district now also take advantage of that. And so those same performers come into those schools and they teach a class in the school. So not only did we open it up to allow kids to come take classes in the studio from those performers, but also those performers went into our schools. And so that, to me, I mean, the studio owner knows that that spoke to my heart, but it also allowed me to bring a resource to my community who wouldn't have had access.
that's tremendous. And I know how much the kids in schools need
That's right.
access to that. I mean, that is the one place where you're going to catch everybody.
That's right.
You know, all kids don't go to church, all kids
Right.
aren't involved in activities, but every kid is going to school.
That's right.
So
That's
if
right.
you can plant a resource somewhere that's really going to be impactful and effective, like the schools is probably a place to start.
It is. It is. And I will say that when people ask me something I'm proud of, again, the commitment to advocating to our studio owner and the fact that she took me up on that and really, and it is still, I'm not there. The studio owner isn't the day to day director anymore, but that commitment is still there to our schools.
The longevity of what you did is still intact.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Can you, okay, so we talked about the happy, happy, joy, joy. Like,
Yes.
you know, one of the things that I say kind of like flippantly and sarcastically is like bringing dance lessons to the hood, bringing ballet lessons to the hood.
I'm
Okay,
here
we
for
did that.
this.
Okay, okay. But let's talk about some of the more serious and more grounded issues that we run into in the school system. I know that food insecurity is one of those issues. I know that kids are experiencing mental health
That's right.
struggles in our buildings. And, you know, just as excited as we are about bringing dance lessons into the buildings, I know that you've done some significant work around some more, let's say, some more targeted areas. So
Absolutely.
talk to me a little bit about some of the other ways that you've really dug in and identified some problems in the school system and worked towards solutions.
Absolutely. So I'll start with food insecurity. Commissioner, the county commissioner, as everyone knows, in Wake County is a huge partner of Wake County Public Schools. So we have a food security team that Wake Ag Extension actually continues to hold that space. They actually hired a AmeriCorps volunteer who now is an employee of Wake County to actually pick up the work that we started. And again, you know, I come to this work again from a place of understanding that if we meet, I always say Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
Today, public health calls it social determinants of health. So if you have food, clothing, shelter, and a sense of belonging, those are the recipes for striving and being successful. That is also true in our public schools. So I came to the school board from a place of knowing that if that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 12 boys have been harmed by sexual violence and abuse
Mm-hmm.
in their lives. So that means the vast majority of students sitting in our classrooms have been impacted by violence against themselves and in their communities. And so I came to the board saying, hey, this is my perspective, and this is the space that I'm going to lean into on the board. I'm not an educator. So I own that I would always be speaking from a place of how do we ensure that those of us who have the least, those of us who've experienced trauma, who have mental health concerns and lack of access to the resources that we need, like food, impacts whether we can learn. And so we started with food, and the food security team will carry on. A school board member will take my place on that team that I was able to start with with a commissioner, and we put a lot of things in place. We have nearly 100 almost not quite 100 schools, but almost that we provide free breakfast and lunch to. It took us about 10 years to get there, but we did it incrementally. We worked with community organizations who were already doing backpack buddies. Our sorority does a program where we take food and snacks into the schools. So we started with community partners who were already making investments into the school, and then we built it out to what can the school and county do. So we appropriated money to ensure that we were actually able to uplift breakfast and lunch in the building. A lot of people don't know we've moved to farm to table in a lot of our schools. So we are trying to bring more healthier foods into our schools. We're allowing our cafeteria staff to experiment with using fresh North Carolina products to create meals. So one of the big ones is they created muffins in one of our schools that they now sell in our schools that were created with farm to table ingredients from right here in North Carolina. So those were things that were important to us. We were addressing both the food insecurity, but we were also addressing economic security in our
Mm-hmm.
community by engaging local farmers and ag producers by purchasing things from them through the school system. So that will maintain itself, and that program will continue to grow. And ultimately, I will go to the General Assembly working for Meals for All, which is an already established organization, to look at how can we ensure all 115 LEAs in the state of North Carolina actually allow free breakfast and lunch to all students. And then how do we also ensure that the waste that we're using, so if they're fruits or vegetables can and snacks, can we put them aside so kids can grab them throughout the day? So some people have set up like a snack cart. So we've really tried to be creative to ensure that kids have the food, which we believe substance and the data supports directly impacts academic outcomes. So that's the work that I did in Wake County, but I will also plan to take that to the General Assembly. The same thing with mental health. We've been very fortunate that Wake Med has been a partner. Wake County Public Schools already has a partnership with a mental health provider where our students can have access to free services To be honest, the services were not adequate, meaning we have more need than we have providers that can meet those needs. And so we've started to invest in partnership with Wake Med. How do we cross train their mental health providers with our mental health providers so that we not only are meeting the needs of our students, but we're also meeting the needs of our families? Because what we all know too is when families are healthy, our babies are healthy, and that certainly means better outcomes for everyone. So to your point, both mental health and well-being have been a priority to me. And the last thing I'll say about that, and I'm saying it because I want it to be an echo,
Okay.
not in a vacuum, but an echo broadly, that I also believe our educators need mental health support. So one of the things I kept trying to figure out during COVID is how do we provide educators with what I kept calling a respite or sabbatical, because that's what we call it in the nonprofit world, is our educators are human. And we have the same expectations that we have of elected officials, that they come problem free, that they show up every day as they're joyful, jovial, ready to educate every student and leaving their whole lives behind. And that's not how we are not that way as people, but that is our expectation of educators. And so it has been my driving force to say, how do we also support our educators, recognizing that they have families, that they're human? And we saw that come to full light during COVID when educators were on Zoom or Google Meet or Canvas trying to educate students, and their own kids were in the home. And so it allowed me a broader platform to start talking about the need and well-being of our educators. And some of our schools have taken up some of those things and put things into place to take care of educators.
Mhm.
I always say to my own educator who lives in my house, who had an exorbitant number of days because he believed as an educator that he couldn't miss school, because we all know the saying about what kids do when they have a substitute. And I kept saying that you are your best self when you take care of yourself. So when you are sick, that is what that day is there for. And that is not about taking advantage of it. It is about taking advantage of a resource that is provided so that you are your best self when you show up for your students. And that is something I think we have to train our community, that our educators are human, that they need the same help, resource, and quite frankly, the support and cheering them on to be stewards of their own mental health and well-being. So I say that because it is my mantra that we have to pay educators well, but we also have to take care of their mental health and well-being as well.
There's a ton in that last segment that is going to ring. I could just like stop here and replay everything up to this point one more time, but I won't do that because we have so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
So your work with the Coalition Against Sexual Assault is absolutely vital work. You rattled off a statistic about how many boys and how many girls,
Yeah,
and we know that there is a difference between the two,
that's
but
right.
children in general are at risk. What kinds of things can we put in place as communities that help to safeguard our kids against negative experiences with sexual assault? And also, what can we do so that they feel like they have a safe place and they can come to the community for the help and assistance that they need?
Oh, so well said. Thank you. You know, you're making my heart ring. You're letting me get on all my soapboxes today. So 1 in 4 girls, and girls are more vulnerable. And again, I could go into all the data and research as to why, but largely because women in this country historically have been marginalized and dehumanized. And so that holds true for girls. And all people don't love this, but our country was built on slavery, and in slavery women and girls, but especially Black women and girls, were sexually abused, and it was seen as something to be accepted. And that has not changed. The way that we see women and girls in this country is still very much so second class to men. And that's just the truth. And those who identify as women and girls
Mhm.
are still second in terms of everything, whether it's
Yes.
how we treat them, how we see them, how we respect them. And so that's the first thing to say is this: that the statistic is definitely rooted in patriarchy and toxic masculinity that perpetuates it more for girls. But the same thing is true for boys. Young boys are vulnerable. So it's 1 in 12 boys before the age of 18 are impacted by sexual violence. And I would also say that we've created a culture that silences boys and men.
Mm.
So while sharing that you were sexually assaulted is rare. When I started this work in 1996, I had my first client who called me on the hotline was a 50-plus-year-old woman. I was the first person she ever told she was sexually assaulted. And the only reason she called our hotline at 50 plus is because her daughter had been sexually assaulted, who was a young teen. And her concern was if she would have, she felt blaming herself. If she would have disclosed and got support, she would have been a better parent and protected her daughter. And what I would say to her is what I would say to the public is the way that we can all protect our boys and our girls is to be open about something that is very real in our community. So when we talk about challenging problems, sexual abuse is still taboo. And I tell people they shouldn't be taboo. Sexual abuse is not the same as consensual sex. I understand why that's taboo, but the abuse and harm of our children should not be taboo, and we allow it to perpetuate because we refuse to acknowledge that the statistic is real and
Yeah.
that vast number of people who are impacted means when we look at our households, in our communities, in our classrooms, that so we can count that data and see the number of real people in our lives who've been impacted. But the way that we do that, and this is a short story I share often, is when I was pregnant, I told my entire family, and I'm from a Black family who loves on our babies, right? We pass our babies around. And I said to them, the first thing that I'm going to do is give my daughter autonomy. Because, of course, I had a sonogram, so I knew I was having a girl. And I was like, I'm going to give her autonomy. And if we teach our kids to trust their instinct, their gut from
Mm-hmm.
the beginning, and I call it discernment or gut or instinct, if we teach them to trust that, then it goes a long way for not just them, but the people in their space. So I said to people, you know how some babies, and I think I did this to Carly the first time I met her, I try to figure out if they want you to hold them. And if they don't, then I touch their little legs or their little feet as my way to show them
Mm-hmm.
that I love them and care for them. But I also respect the boundary that they've created by the look on their face, the drawing back that they have, the clinging to their parent. We often saw those things as negatives and we would still pass the baby along, but it is the first time that we can allow our children to harness their instinct. Because if we allow our kids to harness their instinct and we say to them, we trust you, we believe you, that creates the space if someone does cause them harm, that they know that they can share it with someone and they will be believed. And it feels like a long shot for most people, but I promise you, if we allow our kids at a very young age to have bodily autonomy, which means, nope, I don't want to be held. Nope, I don't want to sit on uncle's lap. Nope, I don't want to kiss. Then, and they know that mom's got their back or dad's got their back or auntie's got their back, that when someone does try to harm them, they know that they can go to their safe space, their community. We then create a safe community for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we teach little kids. We teach adults that when we hold things like trauma, our body keeps the score. So it shows up in illness, it shows up in body pains. So sharing that information is a release to our body, which is also a release to our mental state as well. And so we teach people about interventions. How do you support someone else? If you see something, how do you say something in a loving way? To your point, sometimes we can say it kindly and respectfully, like, hey, feels like you feel uncomfortable. How can we help you? And in other cases, we're like, no, I'm going to actually intervene
Mm-hmm.
and call the police. And that's also, or Department of Social Services. And that's really hard in our communities. But if we start doing the things with our littles very early, then we start to create safe communities. But still in this country, most women and boys do not report their sexual assault until there is something else in their life that triggers them to share it.
That's sad. And it seems preventable. It seems like an easy fix, like an easy solve to the thing, but changing mindsets
That's right.
can be a challenge. There were a couple of posts that I saw this holiday season about, hey, it's the holidays and I have this new child in my home, and like if she doesn't want to hug you, I'm not going to make her hug you.
That's right.
And those kinds of things I think are in other communities are a little more accepted,
Right.
and people are seeing and understanding that a little bit differently in other communities. And to your point, I think it's just different in the Black community,
It is
and
different.
and
It is
that,
seen as a sign of disrespect in so many of our communities when we don't let our kids hug or go spend. I didn't let my daughter spend the night with people very early,
mm-mm,
right? I do this for a living. I was like, it was a protective factor for me, not because I didn't trust a family member or a friend. It's because we don't know what other kids have been exposed to.
mm-hmm,
And so, and again, we also know that when kids have been harmed, we all know we played house or kitchen or Barbie and we practice and imitated what we have seen. And
mm-hmm,
so that's the thing that I also explain to people is if you're inviting multiple kids for a sleepover, you nor I know what those kids have experienced. And not that those kids are bad, but they have been caused harm, and kids imitate what they've seen. And so helping people understand those are safeguards that we can put into place. And then also, how do we help adults talk about it? So I had parents come up to me when Gabby was little. They were like, Gabby says she can't spend the night. Tell me why. And people would often say, especially Black people would say to me, well, how do you say that without offending people? And I say to them, I love you. And I know that you care about me and my daughter. However, I'm also caring about our community. And the best way we can do that is to be honest with each other. So she can come over, but she can't sleep over because we can't control the things. And eventually we are going to go to sleep, and eventually they are going to wake up, and eventually they will be in a space, whether it's 5 or 30 minutes by themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
while it may seem over precautious, it's also creating a new way for all of us to be. So I would say I'm giving you permission to do the same thing. You can tell people, hey, I got this friend, she works in sexual assault, and she said this is not okay. Blame it on me. I would always give people permission
That
to
that
to not take it for themselves and just say, I heard this from Monika. You know how she is. I'm good with that, right? Because
make
this is
it my fault.
living. Make it my fault.
My
I
fault.
own that. It's the same thing I would tell Gabby. She would be so
Yeah.
ashamed to say, my mommy said I can't. And I was like, just tell him that's who your mommy is. Tell him your mom's special. Like,
Mm-hmm.
blame it on your mommy, right? Because that way it relieves some of the pressure from the person who isn't as comfortable as I am to talk about these issues.
Yep. I'm a cop kid, so my
Oh,
own
yes.
rules are always and and my husband is not.
Yep.
And he slept over and did and was totally fine. Never had a negative experience.
Right.
And for me, it was one of those moments when we got married and when we had this baby, I was like, okay, here's a thing. We're not doing this thing.
That's
This
right.
is the thing that we're not doing. And it took him a minute to like wrap his head around it.
Mhm.
And I was like, make it my fault. Just tell everybody your wife's crazy. She was
That's
raised by a police officer in Florida. And that ought to be enough to get us off the hook
It's
with
true. It's true. But yeah, I mean, so I always tell people the way that we can help other people create this new way of being we want to be is to blame it on us, right? We can take the credit for it. And I love that you brought up the social media post because I also think that that is a part of culture change. So my organization, the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault, we have a whole link and tools related. Actually, our friend, our soror, Aya's son, did some of the video for us. Like we made videos with young people openly talking about things that are easier to talk about. We didn't directly say, you won't be sexually assaulted, right? We had them talk about things that were natural, a part of a conversation. So it's called Let's Talk. And it gives both parents, but it also gives our teenagers a way to talk about this and create safety for themselves. Because I do believe that the next generation that I'm pouring into and the parents who are raising those kids are the way that we will see culture change.
Yeah, I think that's the truth. I think with with every generation you see shifts and you see changes,
That's
but
right.
I think that since the pandemic, there has been like a drop off. There has been a sharp jag and a turn
Mhm.
that's redirecting how these kids are. Because my daughter is real different. Like she
That's right.
and we took a stab at gentle parenting and being a little more permissive and some of the things that just like
Mhm.
were not okay for us. We got in conversation
Absolutely.
and we're like, okay, but why? How did that serve us? How did
Right.
that serve us? And so making different choices and making different decisions about how we're raising our daughter also in being closely involved in the life of our godson
Mhm.
and like just navigating all of that space in some new and different ways, I think is challenging when she says what she says
Oh,
and she's
yeah.
being honest and upfront with us. It takes me a minute, but I have to be like, wait. She's gonna need that voice. She's gonna need that.
That's right.
Don't
Well, it's
fight.
so funny. I still say and she's 19, but I still say to Gabrielle, I'm like, I want you to be a very strong, self-sufficient, autonomous young woman, but you are also still my child. And so, we certainly parented her very differently than both Bobby and I were parented. But I also had a different set of rules for people outside of our home,
Mm-hmm.
which I had to learn. I
Mm-hmm.
think she was probably fourth or fifth grade, and my mom said, why is she not washing the dishes? And like openly, and we were all sitting there, and my daughter was like, I don't want to wash dishes. And in that moment, like my whole body was like, oh God, how is this?
Here it
Like,
comes.
I'm a whole adult, and I don't think I would have said it that directly to my own mother today. And so I looked at my mom, was like, and I'm the only child. This is my mom's only grandchild, so she adores her and lets her get away with a lot of grandma stuff. But
Yep.
it just totally took my mom off guard, and she was like, "What?" And I was like, so let's take a step back and talk about what just happened here. But at the same time, I still believed that you're the younger of us. So yes, please go wash the dishes. But the way I handled it was, hey, sweetie, this isn't one of those moments where you can tell us why you don't want to do something. None of us want to wash the dishes. So one of us has to. And I'm making the parental decision that it'll be you. Right. And so again, but that would have not happened when I was growing up, which
Right.
still feels, it wasn't a complete negotiation, but it definitely was an explanation that I was raised that you kids don't need an
Don't
explanation.
negotiate with terrorists.
Exactly.
You don't negotiate with terrorists. And
Right.
that's the way that I was raised. And to your point, I am an educator. And even in my classroom, I'm like, I don't negotiate with terrorists. And at the same time, I don't have discipline issues in my classroom. Like
That's right.
we get along just fine. Everybody gets what they need and we do what we have to do and that kind of thing. But it takes a lot of my kids off guard, and a lot of their parents are like,
Right.
but and I'm like, okay, I'm not his mommy.
That's right.
I'm not his mommy. I'm not his auntie. And I have set rules and boundaries in my classroom that help us to get along in this space.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's how we go forward. And so just, to hear that from someone else is refreshing. It
Yes.
is refreshing. It's making me feel like we're going to be okay.
You will, and I'm at 19, and I will tell you that all of our family is like, she's so kind and respectful. So it is possible, but
Okay.
it is much harder to do because we're human, right? We revert back to what we know, and
Yeah.
sometimes quickly before we know it. But again, I mean, she's 6. Is she 6 yet?
6. She's
Oh
6.
my God. So it definitely gets easier, right? Because now you have 6 years of habit of this type of parenting. But
Mm-hmm.
earlier when she was definitely very verbal and negotiating, it was definitely hard not to, but to your point, we still had boundaries, right? And
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah.
Um, and those are much easier to if you establish them early. And once
Mm-hmm.
you establish them early, and they are still children, and we want them to still push the boundaries, right? Because it's how they learn, but we
Yeah.
want them to understand that there are also responsibility that come with that as well. And so it's practice, but I knock on wood somewhere that so far so good.
It was funny. My husband and I were doing some Christmas shopping. We were out and about on Christmas Eve, which is not the time necessarily to just be out and about.
Same.
And and so that was our first mistake. But as we were out and about, I was looking around, and I'm very observant. I don't always say what I see, but I always see it.
Right.
And so I was looking around, and I just leaned over and I said something to my husband that made him chuckle. And I was like, next year I'm going to start just moving through the world like a white man, because the level of just
The
privilege and
privilege.
audacity, they don't even think about not being able to do something. They don't even think about not having I mean, even just things like crossing
Right.
the street. It was a gentleman that just crossed the street. He just walked.
That's
He
right.
just walked. And I
That's
was like, and here I am, like holding my bag, holding Corey, looking both ways, testing a toe out.
exactly. That's
And it
right.
occurred to me that that's how I live my life. And I'm very
Oh,
cautious.
that is such a beautiful explanation of privilege.
And and when I saw and he just shot right past us, and I was like, oh, all right. So that's a thing for me to consider. And I think culturally, it comes back to the conversation we just had. They've
Mhm.
always had this space to question and
That's
to
right.
try and to stretch out and to move differently, and
That's
know
right.
that their community is going to catch them. Their
That's right.
their their problem is going to be somebody else's problem.
That's right.
This, but they have this ingrained sensibility about it being fine to
Mhm.
just do it. And I think that our kids will benefit ultimately, if we can just
Absolutely.
rein in some of
Absolutely. It's so funny you say that because again, in both education and anti-sexual violence, I talk a lot about privilege. And I remember the year I was elected to the school board, I made a comment about my role of being a Black woman and a parent on the school board was
Mhm,
about acknowledging that our students who look like me, don't operate in the same privilege. And I
mhm,
was called to a legislator's office who represented my district at that time, and he was very offended that I used the word privilege. And he said, "Well, I mean, I don't understand what you mean. Why would you use the word privilege?" And I was like, it is only a word that is offensive to you because it feels out of context, because it's your lived experience. Your
mhm,
lived experience, as will be your child's lived experience, is that this world, not just the United States, but this world is structured in a way, especially for white men, white males, that it is your world. And that is the most literal way that I can put it. So
mhm,
if we both show up at the same place at the same time, regardless of who is on the receiving end, that person's race, age, gender, sex does not matter. They will treat you differently than they will me, because we live in a culture where white men exercise privilege. And I said that to him. I said, so if you and I walk downstairs to the legislative cafeteria and there are largely Black people there, they are going to serve you before they ask me, even if I am standing in front of you or beside you, because that is the culture that we've created that allows white men privilege that you
mhm,
don't know you have. You
mhm,
don't even understand your privilege because you walk in it every day. I
mhm.
said, so I will call it your lived experience versus my lived experience if privilege is offensive to you. But privilege is still a very real thing. And I liken, and I said to him, I'm privileged, right? I'm a Black woman who speaks English in this country, I'm an American citizen. I have status in this country. I don't have a
Married.
I'm married. I don't have a
Mhm,
disability. I am cisgendered. I am a woman who presents as a woman who's married to a man. I'm elected official. All of those things give me privilege to somebody who has not any of those things that I just noted. So yes, I also have a lived experience of operating in privilege. But sir, it is not like your privilege. Right? And so we all have to acknowledge that there are things that we have, whether it's our English language in this country or our physical ability or our race or our gender, that gives us privileges. And, again, I'll circle back to why Kwanzaa and these principles are important, is because it's to ground me in who I am when the privileges that I do have still fly in the face of the ultimate privilege in this country, because it does and it will.
true, true. And I'm glad you brought it back to, the sense of privilege that, that some Black people and Black women have. So I want to stick a pin right there and talk about how, as women who operate in perceived privilege and in privilege, let me strike perceived,
Right.
as women who operate in privilege and who are seeking to be in community with all of our brothers and sisters,
Right.
how how how
I,
can we authentically connect
yeah.
and offer assistance and offer uh, to just be in community without that perception of just giving charity and
Oh, I love this question so much.
it can feel gross sometimes for
I
a
love this.
stronger way of presenting that notion,
Mhm.
but it can be icky when I show up and I'm like, hey y'all, I'm here to help.
Yep.
Let me know what you know. So
Yep.
let's.
Oh, so let me say this. So when I was first elected to the school board, there was a lot of assumptions about who I was. And
Mm,
so different for me than it is for you or Corey or Bobby. I am a living statistic, right? Like, I was raised by a single parent in a multi-generational home, raised by with my maternal grandparents. So I am the statistic that America speaks to that shouldn't be here today. Well, people didn't know that because the way that I look, the way that I present myself, the privileges that I have made people assume that I was born into a two parent. I was raised like white folk. Let me just be clear, right?
mhm,
That's what people assume.
mhm,
And
mhm.
unfortunately, I can say that because I'm raising a daughter in a two-parent home, all the things, quote unquote, that we want, right? That the American dream. And so those were people's assumptions. So for me, that was my first gut, is to explain and to say, and then I realized that's condescending for me to say that, because they're talking about the place that I sit today. And the place
Mhm.
that I sit today, while I am truly, I defy those statistics, the place that I sit today is a place of privilege. And I leaned into what I do in my day job, which is we believe in community organizing. I don't get to say to any community that I'm not a part of what we need.
Mhm.
So I think you might be old enough to remember FUBU, for us by us.
Yes.
So that is the principle that I do my day job,
Yeah.
is when I go into community and I want to talk about how do we prevent sexual violence in any community, the first thing I say is, who are your community leaders? Who are the influencers? Because it's not me. And so that's how I came to this space as a school board member, wanting to be a part of a community that I was so openly and loudly advocating for. I was on
Mhm.
the school board talking about redlining and like how districting and the homes that we can purchase are based on our race, even in the 2020s, right? Like that's how
Yes.
I came onto this board. And but it sounds condescending if I take that to a community that I'm not a part of. I'm not from Raleigh. So I really said to community members who were saying, you don't get to speak for us. And I was like, you're 100% right. I don't. So you speak for you. You stand before the school board. You tell me I can be your voice. The choice is yours, but it is your story and your way that you want me to talk about it. So that's still how I go into community. Like if I'm right now as a school board member, I have people tap me in the food line because that's our closest grocery store. um, um,
For now.
for now,
For
school
now.
city councilman Branch.
Don't
That's
worry
our
about it. Don't worry about
that's my running joke that we need multiple grocery stores, but Food Line is our closest grocery store. And so I have people say, "Are you on the school board?" And they say, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "This is my community, right? This is where I live." And people are often surprised. Again, I say that to say that there are also assumptions made about those of us who are in privilege.
it.
And
Mhm.
so for me, the easiest way to show up in community authentically is to authentically say, hey, yep, I'm Monika. I hold an elected office. And yes, I want to be clear on what this community needs and how you want me to talk about it. And so, again, I'm new to representing parts of District 33 that were not a part of my school board. I want a whole community. I want to be in community with people who this is their home community. Now, I do say it's sort of my home community now. I've raised a child; she's 19, born and raised here. But I do. I let them guide me, and then I also don't do that without a community influencer, because it's not me. It's not elected officials. It is the people in the community that are trusted to be the voice. And I also say we are not a monolith. Black folk not a monolith.
Mhm.
Our 27610 zip code is not a monolith. Right? So there are multiple influencers and there are multiple people who also hold a sense of privilege, because being an influencer in your community is privilege. And
Yeah.
so I go to them and say, how do we do this? What are you hearing? Here's what
And
I'm hearing. And then how do we coalesce and be in community to meet those needs? And I said that when our sorority nationwide started saying we're going to address hunger in our schools. And I said to people who know me very well in this community, but in other communities, make sure you talk to your community about where that should be and who you are working with. We should not make assumptions, because, first of all, if we're in the sorority, we already are sitting with some privilege. So
Mhm.
let's ask the community where we should be. Let's take cues from the people who can tell us what the real needs are in their community and not our perceived needs. So again, I always say take the community leaders with you, find the community leaders. There are multiple in one community,
Yep.
and then you sit at their feet and you also bring them alongside you.
100% true. So rich in all of the things that you just said. It's yeah, perception feeds into a lot of that.
It
And
does.
when you, the other thing that I say is that, like, break bread together, because
Oh,
like
yes.
when you've shared a meal with people, when I can like relax and like put my elbows on the table and eat my chicken wings with you,
That's right. That's right.
it's a different conversation that happens.
How can I
And
leave out food? You are right, my friend.
food has sort of become a theme in these in
It's
these
food, though.
interviews as well. It is,
It's,
and it's food and music. I think
that's
the
right.
arts offer us an opportunity to converge and see some similarities with each other, and
Absolutely.
appreciate each other. But we'll save more on that for creativity night.
Yes, you will. But yes, thank you for weaving food in because, again, Black women often coalesce and teach the next generation things in the kitchen, not just how to cook, but teach you about life is often in our kitchen around food, which is central to our community, especially. So every person has to eat. Let me clarify for people who are watching. Everyone has to have food and nourishment, but food is a part of our soul, like music is. And so those are definitely recipes for building community.
I love that. So, as we approach the end of our time
Yeah.
together, we're having such a good time. But as we start thinking about pulling tonight to a close, there's
Yeah.
a question that I am posing to all of my guests. And it comes from the theme that has been proposed by Dr. Milana Karenga, the founder of Kwanzaa. We are blessed to still have him, and every year he issues a theme, a charge, he issues a statement. And this year, he has selected something that is just ringing so true to me. And I want to get some feedback and see if this is also landing with all of my guests as well. So, the theme that he has selected for 2024 is celebrating Kwanzaa in difficult and demanding times, lifting up the light that lasts.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it is resonating strongly, and I'm sure with everyone you're going to talk to, not just you, because these times are difficult, and and I liken it to the election was difficult for so many of us in our community, but inflation is real in our community, right? So the price of everything. Um, it's funny because right now the media is eggs, and I'm like, yeah, in the Black community we usually talk about milk and bread, but
Yeah.
yes, those cost of those staples, I'll call them staples for food, are through the roof. But so is housing, right? Everything that we need. Again, back to my core belief of Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? We need food, shelter, a place of people, and a sense of belonging. We need those things, and all of those things, except for the thing that we still can give freely, is a sense of belonging and a sense of community. The rest of those things are at an all-time high, and the sensibility about who we are as a nation is shaky right now, right? Like, who are we? Who is our community? How do we define that? All of those things are right now so uncertain for so many communities. And I would say that for African Americans and for the Black community, we've had a light lifted that has lasted us. Our ancestors lifted a light that has been passed to us through the most difficult times. And while this time is difficult for us and our generation, it is. I'm a Gen Xer, and so people always say I'm the generation who had no real struggle, right? Like no real societal ill that would have prepared us for a time as this. And I would say for me, as someone who's Black and believes that the history is a part of our DNA, right? Like slavery and the things that my ancestors went through absolutely is on my DNA. So while
Mhm.
I didn't experience them, the hardship, but also the light that they continue to shine within, but also passed on to their brothers and sisters. So whether that's the Underground Railroad or whether that's the Civil Rights Movement or today, the ways in which we're trying to ensure that we lift up all of our brothers and sisters, that light has lasted. And I believe it is up to us to call on that light and to shine that light for those who haven't always been felt like the light was accessible to them, right? So I feel like times are really difficult, and it is my job for whatever light that I'm still shining bright on the inside, that I'm reflecting that to those in my circle, those that I love, those that experience me. So yes, I've just as much trial and tribulation and hurt and harm that so many other people do. But I am an eternal optimist because I stand on the shoulders of people who've gone before me, who endured so I could have the opportunity to live the life that I live. And I expect nothing but greater for our daughters and our sons to come after us. So it is difficult. And while it is hard to remind us that we've had more difficult times, it is important for us to remember that times have been difficult before, and
Mhm.
we have sustained and passed that on to the next generation. But I would also be remiss, because this is the piece that I didn't learn as a child from my family. Rest is also revolutionary. And
Come
so
on.
I am giving us permission to rest and to restore and to see that as a part of how our lights continue to last, and how we lift it up is that we lift up rest and we lift up it's okay to pass the baton. So at my work, because we work in trauma, I tell people all the time, tap me on the shoulder and tell me it's time for you to tap out. You need a break. It is okay. It is not incumbent upon any one of us to carry the load alone. And that's how we lift up the light that lasts, is we share the burden.
Ashe and amen, girl.
Ashe.
I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to celebrate Kwanzaa together. My sister, my friend, I see you at events and whatnot, and we're all dressed up and done to the nines. But when I look over my glasses across the room, the code is, you okay?
Yes.
All right. And it warms my heart every time I see you on stage and you're speaking and you're leading, and to watch how you have blossomed and grown and transitioned, and just you have been masterful in how you are navigating the space on behalf of the community, and alongside, more importantly, the community. I'm just so proud to have you in my circle. So proud that you were one of Carly's aunties.
Yes.
And just really, really glad that you agreed to just spend a few moments.
Thank you for inviting me into this space. Like I said to you, I was humbled and honored, and I'm so glad to share this space with you. And thank you for creating this space. I will say again, as I prepare in this year and prepare to go into the next, that I didn't know that I needed to say these things, right? Because they're going to be people who are listening will hear it, but these are things that, sometimes you don't know what's in your heart and your gut until you open your mouth. And so it's also food for my own soul to remind myself that I don't have to carry any of these burdens as I embark upon a new journey, that I am in community. And so thank you for being a part of my community. Thank you for creating this online community. And in any way that I can be supportive and uplift and shine a brighter light on the work that you're doing, you know how to get me. I'm a phone call, a text message away, because I do believe creating this space in this community is important to all of us during these difficult times to keep lifting our light that lasts.
I love that. And with that, we are going to close out. But I want you to tell everybody where we can find you, how we can get in touch with you. So just give us the roll call. Where are you and how do we?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at elect, ELECT, Monika, Monika. You can also find me still on X today. I have not removed myself from X yet, at M Johnston Hostler, Hostler. But you can also just email me at Monika FORNC @gmail.com. So MONIKA FORNC @gmail.com. And again, I plan to continue the way that I lead alongside our community. So always feel free to reach out to me. And I look forward to being in continuous community with you. And thank you so much again. I believe that this space and these principles are important to lift up. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, friends, I want to invite everybody to appreciate Monika one more time, but also join us tomorrow night. Come right back at 7:00 for night 4. We have an incredible guest. I am not revealing my guests in advance this year. I want you to be surprised. So when you are on the mailing list that you can find at flow.page /livingkwanzaa. Once you're on the mailing list, you'll get the email first thing in the morning. That's your little first glance. And then go ahead and join us right back here at 7:00 tomorrow night for our celebration of Ujima. We're going to talk about the money, where the money resides, We're going to get down to it. All right, friends, I love you so much. Hariza Kwanzaa, may your Kwanzaa be blessed.
Thank you.